Okay, so we got two news stories concerning Cyberpunk
Ooh,
2077. Two
right.
news stories. First of all, it's been announced that there's going to be an Ultimate Edition release, which in theory is really compelling, right? Because we've been looking to see physical editions of actual finished games, fully patched, all content. And this is on, in theory, what the Ultimate Edition should be. Second part of this is that we're going to be talking about some experiments Alex did with Cyberpunk 2077's DLSS 3.5 Ray Reconstruction with some DLL swapping shenanigans. But John, I'm going to go to you first about
Mm.
the Ultimate Edition because in theory, this is all fairly straightforward, right? It's essentially a Game of the Year update that brings together all of the content. The game is complete. The patches are there. It's just lock and load, right? Or wrong.
Well, I mean, yeah, it is technically that, I would say, but
Right.
there was some kerfuffle this week
Kerfuffle.
regarding
Kerfuffle.
the packaging of its DLC within the physical version. So I appreciate
Right.
that they are releasing physical versions of this game across each platform. And in fact, so this is more like ownership versus preservation, because I would say if you really want to preserve this game, the GOG version, and actually I think Steam as well, they don't have DRM, right? So that's
Yeah.
actually really awesome. But if you want a physical disc version, they're now offering this for Xbox and PC or PS5. Here's the unexpected twist, though, and it's actually kind of hidden in their initial press photo. If you look at the three side by side, is that the DLC, Phantom Liberty, is not included on the disc for PlayStation 5, but it is included on one of the discs with the Xbox version, and that led to some confusion over what's going on. And so spoken with plenty of people about repackaging disc versions for release. And I have some theories as to why the PS5 version doesn't include it. So I'm going to share my theories. I don't have any insider information into what CD Projekt Red specifically has done, but there's two things. First of all, it is true that many PS5 games thus far that have had these re-releases did include DLC as codes. Unfortunately, Final Fantasy VII Remake Integrate, for instance, that had the DLC as a code. And basically the issue here is that to get it as a separate thing for the disc where the DLC is integrated requires you to create a new build of the game, from what I can tell. And then that has to go through like QA and like, the whole process, basically the submission process, and get through all that. So there is actually R&D time and effort that must be spent to do this. But as of 2023, I have noticed, and other people actually pointed this out to me, that there's been a number of games that actually do ship with DLC on the disc, and it's installed through the system menu and sort of listed as optional DLC that you can actually just select and install off the disc. On that front, I actually think that that's something that they must have added to the SDK in the last year or so. So I think this is a
Right.
fairly new thing. I don't know 100%, but I can't find any instances of this being available in older titles on the PS5. So I think it's new. So what may have happened, if I had to guess, is that CD Projekt Red did not want, for whatever reason, even though they did this for The Witcher 3, they didn't want to make a new separate version of the game to go through all those processes with the DLC integrated, like an actual complete version.
Like
And
Horizon
right,
Forbidden West.
like
Right?
Horizon Forbidden West, and in fact, The Witcher 3, which
Yeah.
has a complete version. But also, it's possible that they are using an older version of the SDK for Cyberpunk, and maybe that does not support this like DLC integration onto the disc as well. So I think that there still could have been solutions for them to follow, I think, but clearly they determined that they didn't want to jump through those hoops, and so they did not. And as a result, you don't get the DLC on there. And that is kind of a bummer, I think, because it would be nice to have everything, the patch version, the DLC, everything included in that version. But you do get it on Xbox. And that is,
Yeah, that's the one thing I was wondering about.
so that
What
is,
what's particular to Xbox that allows it exactly?
I think Xbox has had this ability to integrate that into a disc version for a long time, basically.
Okay.
Like, I don't think this was ever actually a thing. Sony's
Right.
previous method of basically requiring you to author a new version, a new complete version of the game, seemed to be the hang up that a lot of games ran into, right?
Okay.
And so now they seem to have fixed that, but Cyberpunk's not taking advantage of it from what I can see. So it's kind of like, it's not really a case of like anybody specifically is at quote unquote fault here. It's more like the way things played out, none of the solutions happened in the right order, right time to sort of allow them to do what they wanted to do for whatever reason. And as a result, this is what we have. Although I did see some funny theories from people online that saying it's actually because CD Projekt Red is still salty at Sony for taking their game off the store.
Clearly.
And I was thinking I'd love to see that in a business review where they quote unquote are salty and won't do something for a release because they're mad at another company.
This is kind of bizarre because, we're talking about, multi-million-dollar businesses here.
Yeah.
They don't interact in that way.
No, they do not.
This kind of pettiness that exists within the fanboy community does not translate into the boardrooms of companies like Sony Interactive Entertainment and CD Projekt Red. It just doesn't. It's just a logistical issue, right? One way or another. That's what it is, right? And it's just bizarre. Some of the stuff I see posted online, utterly bizarre. I don't really know what to say about that. I guess it is just on the one hand, you're quite right. In terms of preserving the game, there are DRM-free versions available on PC. But, you would have liked everything to have been collated together for console owners as well. And there is a case of preservation of specific versions, right?
Also, the PC version, not surprisingly, does not come with discs or physical media. It is code-based, but it is, of course, DRM-free. But when Baldur's Gate 3 was announced for physical release, somebody actually asked Larian about this, like, why is the PC version just a code in a box? And they had actually explored different options. And one, they found that the number of users with Blu-ray drives in their PC is so tiny, right?
0.
So that would have
Like
been useless for most people, right? DVDs, not viable, just too small, would have taken an insane number of them. But they also actually looked at USB as an option, like a USB key, but they found that the reliability of them was too low, and it would have resulted in potentially too many cases of defective product ending up in the consumer hands, and it's just a hassle for everyone. So it's interesting that they actually did do the legwork to try to find a solution for that, and they basically determined that it's not worth doing, which is a shame, but it makes sense in the PC space. But again, CD Projekt Red's probably doing the right thing here for PC users, where it's like, here's a code that grants you access to a DRM-free version that you can then save and keep, and that's cool.
I still think they should have done the disc in the case of Baldur's Gate, because the collector's edition is never really about utility.
I agree. That would have been awesome.
It's
pure preservation.
It's about the item. It's about having this wonderful thing, and having not having the game within that just seems kind of bizarre.
I agree. I still agree, but it's nice that they actually did at least think about it. And
write about it somewhere.
Well, let's move on to the second Cyberpunk story of this particular week, which is that obviously, Alex, when you did your content for DLSS 3.5 and Cyberpunk 2077, Reconstruction was looking really promising in some respects, but there were clear issues in other respects, essentially because it's an emergent technology, right? And neural networks have still to be trained to the optimal condition, and you likened it to the origins of DLSS 2.0, which had issues to begin with, but has iterated over time into what is close to, like one might say, the finished article. Right. So for Cyberpunk, I guess what you did here was to take the DLSS 3.5 DLL from Alan Wake and then just stick it into Cyberpunk, right?
Pretty easy. Yeah, they updated Alan Wake's most recent version, came with a newer version of the DLL. I think it's like the most recent patch, actually. So I saw there's some writings online about it, and I wanted to test it myself, mainly because I don't always trust everything I read online about subjective image quality.
Really? You don't believe
No, I don't.
Really?
I don't.
No.
So I was curious about it, and there are differences. But you can still see, sorry, I've got to bring up my phone for this because I don't have a screen in front of me. So I'm going to be like looking at it over here to like call out all the times of all the things I looked at. I looked at a specific scene in the game by swapping out the DLL. I have the original I have the current version of the NRD denoiser on the far left. So the NRD is the one that you get if you don't turn on ray reconstruction. If you're not using RTX GPU or you don't like ray reconstruction, etc. That's the one on the far left. Then to the right of that is the original launch version of the game's ray reconstruction. I save all my video files. This one's slightly compressed, so to make it all even, I've actually slightly compressed all the other video files here just so that they're perfectly in sync in terms of bitrate. And then to the right of that is the current version of the game with its current version of the ray reconstruction DLL. And then the far right is the Alan Wake 2 DLL injected into the game. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's 4 different recordings.
It's all a lot of injections.
It's a lot of injections. I'm going to hit the play button. Basically here, the first thing I want to call out, in this scene in my original video, I looked at this one gentleman, this presumably drugged out gentleman at a shack at the bottom of Night City. When he would move his head and loll backwards and forward, you could see that there was a huge ghost behind his head in the original launch ray reconstruction image. As you go progressively to the right in this image, looking at each more updated version of the game and updated DLL of ray reconstruction, you can actually see that it disappears incrementally. There's still a tiny bit left, actually, using the Alan Wake 2 ray reconstruction DLL on the far right, but it is, I would say, quite a bit better than the launch version. There's also some differences in like the normal map response on the character's back, which I found interesting. No idea what caused that. Another thing that I wanted to point out is that some of the, how do you call it? The sharpening that I pointed out, that like original over sharpening.
Quite egregious.
It's awful.
Yeah. If you look at the back of this, I don't know what you call it. It looks like a desk lamp on the table here. If you look at the little wire snaking into the back of it, you can actually see that the amount of sharpening that is there. Like you can see like a rim bit of light on the outside of it. It's gone down progressively with each version of the game and each version of the DLL. I would still posit, though, that it is still there to a degree.
Yeah, it is. That's what gives it this oil painting like look, I find. This AI upscale kind of nastiness.
But the interesting thing, though, is, and I talked about this in the Alan Wake 2 video, is it doesn't seem to have that.
No, it doesn't.
Really.
It really does not.
So there was an interview you can check out on the web about this. WCCF Tech did an interview with Jakob Knapek, who I also talked with for that Ray Reconstruction Roundtable video, and they pointed out in that interview, Jakob, that they've been working on the game since then. There's probably going to be another update soon enough to the game, and they're going to be looking at some of the issues with the Ray Reconstruction in it. I presume it's going to be about the sharpening. I presume they also mentioned how they've changed some of the indirect lighting to make it more like coherent. And actually, if you go online and you look at other sources, I believe there was a GDC or GTC presentation about how they did restir, as in the ray selection technique for the direct lighting in the game. They mentioned actually that they did not use restir GI for the indirect lighting. They just used straight up like rather naive sampling. So if they changed that to restir for an update to the game that is going to be coming out soon, that would actually have big benefits for the quality of the indirect lighting in the game. So if they did that for an update that's coming out, that's going to be interesting. Another thing that I wanted to talk about, so you can look at, there's other comparisons I made here that Oliver is going to be showing on screen. I showed off like texture differences. You can see that there's differences in the way a texture looks versus the original version of the game. There's, just stuff like that. But another thing I wanted to point out actually was, I've got to scroll ahead in the video myself. Sorry. It's the very low tech way to do this. It's not your standard Digital Foundry thing. One thing I want to show off that is still in the game is there's this NPC here, standing here. And on the left-hand side is the NRD denoiser, and the right-hand side is the ray reconstruction. And one thing that the original denoiser has issues with is actually doing any sort of like indirectly sparsely lit areas.
Oh yeah.
The NRD denoiser has trouble actually getting any sort of like specularity looking right, any detail, shadow detail. It's pretty rough actually. So on the left-hand side, it looks kind of like blown out and rough, and it's totally lacking in detail and lighting detail. But on the right, there's more light and detail, but you can see a ton in this shot, a ton of the, I'm going to call them AI reconstruction errors in them, where you see, look at the guy's face. It looks like weirdly like blotchy and like there's lines drawn on it. And if you look at the background, I do like the enhanced lighting detail, but one thing you should notice is that I'm going to say like this is something they really need to work on for ray reconstruction, is that lines that were once straight on the left-hand side, and I'm going to call them proper, even though they're lacking lighting detail, on the ray reconstruction side, they're wavy.
Yeah.
Like they have stylization in them that shouldn't be there.
That's what gives it that AI upscaled look.
That's what gives it the AI upscaled look, and I think this is a perfect shot to show off the issue of it. So if they are updating ray reconstruction of the game, if they're working on ray reconstruction over time, this is like a perfect use case scenario. Go to Cyberpunk in one of these overcast areas where there's like a bunch of stuff in the way. It's just completely indirectly lit, and look at people's faces and then try and match it from there.
Also,
and that's like the key, I think.
The ghosting there when he moves his head is pretty.
It's intense.
Like wow.
Yeah, and that's the current Alan Wake 2 denoiser right there. I think I have that labeled correctly. But either way, so I wanted to show this off. Yes, it is better in terms of overall amount of. I would say the detail's better. I would say there's a little bit less sharpening, and I would say that the ghosting is turned down in the one specific example I called out. But the key hallmarks are still there. And this could be a Cyberpunk specific issue. It could be a ray reconstruction specific issue.
Or both.
It's hard to know. But it's still there. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Well, it's interesting to see progress so quickly, though, right? I mean,
it's only been 2 months, right? So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so breakneck advances there. I mean, it is still an emergent technology, though, but it is just so promising and potentially game-changing. And it's great to see there is actual improvement happening there, an actual response to feedback as well, which sometimes happens, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes happens in an extremely slow way.
Yeah, like years later, you realize it's different or something. But like here, no, I think behind the scenes, just from what I hear, that they've taken the response and criticism of Ray Reconstruction's initial outing so far, and they are working on it. That's what I've heard behind the scenes from unknown sources.
Mm-hmm. So we can believe the internet in this case, Alex.
To a degree. It's not perfect. I would definitely not say it gets rid of ghosting. It's still there.
Okay, fair enough.
All right.